Hello, I'm Irma Baker, welcoming you to our show. We're sponsored by RSVP, the Retired Senior Volunteer Program, and RSVP is a part of Mature Services. We like to think of our show as a kaleidoscope. You know what a kaleidoscope does? It shows an ever-changing array of interesting objects that we feel highlight what's going on in our area. We highlight programs, organizations, and individuals here in our viewing area. After these messages, we'll be back with today's guest.
RSVP of Summit County has been making a difference in our community since 1972. RSVP volunteers are increasing the quality of life by participating in programs and organizations that provide important services to the community. RSVP matches personal interests and skills with opportunities to serve. If you're interested in adding more meaning to your life and improving the lives of others, please call 330-253-4597, extension 166.
Welcome back. Our guest today is Cassy Daniels. Cassy, it's wonderful to have you here with us today.
Thank you. This is going to be fun.
I think it is too, because I've been a fan of yours for a long time. And for those of you who don't know Cassy, she is a local author specializing right now in mysteries, but you started out in other formats, didn't you?
Yes, the first few books I published were historical romance for no other reason except I had story ideas in my head, and when I started looking at markets, I realized that's what the markets were calling historical romance. So that's what I started out in. But I've also written contemporary romances. I've written young adult horror. I've written one children's book, and now I'm writing mysteries.
Well, that is a lot to accomplish. How many books have you published?
So far, 40.
40?
Yes, since my first book was published in 1992, just had a 20-year anniversary of publishing. So 40 books in 20 years.
Now, my mental math is not always very good, but even I can figure out that sounds like about 2 books a year.
2 books a year, yes, minimum.
Minimum of 2 books a year. That is quite a production. How did you ever get started? I mean, did you grow up thinking, I am going to be an author?
Well, I always enjoyed reading, certainly. Always at the library, always with my nose in a book. And I majored in English in college, and of course there's not a whole lot you can do with English if you're not going to teach. After college I worked in a number of different communication jobs, corporate communications, things like that. But at the back of my mind I always thought, wouldn't it be cool to be an author? But I had this sort of mental block because I would watch authors on shows like this being interviewed on TV, and I'd think, gosh, aren't they lucky? She got to be she was born an author, or whatever my little brain was telling me. And I just sort of thought, well, you got to be born that way. It's got to happen to you. And one day I finally woke up and realized, well, if you don't try, how do you know if you can do it or not? So that's what happened, and that's how I got started.
How long did it take you to actually get a first manuscript done?
Oh, it probably took about 18 months to write, maybe even longer than that. I also had small children at home at the time, so that always adds to the excitement. Probably 18 months to 2 years, start to finish.
Were you working full-time at that time?
No. I was home with the kids, and I would sometimes do some freelance communication, PR kinds of things. But no, not working full-time. I know plenty of authors who do, and I don't know how they do it.
Well, tell me this. You're writing a manuscript. What kind of mistakes do you make in a first manuscript?
Tons. In a first manuscript, in a 41st manuscript, you make tons. And again, that all gets back to those little games our brains play with us. Because so many of us, whether we're experienced or this is a first book, we think, wow, if I'm not doing it perfect, I shouldn't be doing it. And you know, I always tell people, you wouldn't expect to sit down and play the piano perfect the first time you ever sit down at a piano, or know how to play basketball the first time you step out on a basketball court. And yet something makes us think we should be able to write perfectly the first time we do it. So what at least what I tell myself is, you know, I'm just here, I'm putting the words down, I can always change them. And that helps. That helps a lot.
Did you have characters in your mind, or did you have plots in your mind? How did the first manuscript come together, or the first manuscripts? Because I'm sure you had all these ideas going on in your head.
Every book is different. It depends. For my very first book was a historical romance called Twilight Secrets, and it takes place in Victorian England because I'm a sucker for Victorian England. Give me a guy in a top hat any day. I just had this picture in my head of a music hall and a woman standing on stage singing at the music hall. That's kind of just where that started. But these days, you know, like I said, ideas come from anywhere. One of the mystery series I'm writing right now, the Pepper Martin Mysteries, is a woman who works in a cemetery and she solves mysteries for the ghosts in her cemetery. That came about because I love cemeteries and I hang out in cemeteries. And I once had a job interview in a cemetery as a tour guide in a cemetery, and I didn't get the job, but I had wanted to write a mystery at that point, a mystery series. Couldn't come up with a detective I was happy with. And as I'm driving out of the cemetery that day, I thought, aha, tour guide in a cemetery. So, you know, like I said, every book is different. Ideas come from everywhere. And the more you look for them, the more you find them.
Well, I started reading the Pepper Martin series with the very first book, Dawn of the Dead, and I remember being thrilled to know that there was a female mystery author. Cleveland has produced a number of male mystery authors, but I was not aware of any female mystery authors, so I was thrilled to find that there was some woman. At that time, of course, I hadn't met you, didn't know you. And here was finally someone writing a female-based mystery series set in Cleveland.
Set in Cleveland, which makes it a lot of fun. And a whole lot easier to do research than Victorian England, that's for sure. It's fun to do things close to home, and the newest book is called Wild Wild Death, and there's a very vague sort of connection with Cleveland Indians baseball, and my whole family, we're huge baseball fans. So it's been fun to do that kind of stuff and bring in different neighborhoods, the Rock Hall in Ohio City and the West Side Market and all these things, and throw it all into the books.
I love the setting of Cleveland for your mysteries and the places and the themes. I think that what I've found in your books is that the characters always have some little twist. There's always an added dimension to your characters that I find very interesting. For instance, in the Pepper Martin series, here she is, this young woman who is a tour guide in a cemetery, and it's very much like what, Lakeview Cemetery.
Similar, yes.
Similar, yes. We don't want to say it isn't called Lakeview.
Right, it's a grand cemetery, as Lakeview is.
With a lot of historical people who are buried there. Why don't you just give us a little idea of what that basis or that premise is for the Pepper Martin series? How did she start talking to ghosts?
Well, in the series, in the first book, which is Dawn of the Dead, as you mentioned, you don't see this. This happens before the book starts. But she has been giving a tour in Garden View Cemetery is the name of the cemetery where she works. And she is taking a tour group around to a mausoleum of an old mafia don whose name was Gus Scarpetti. I've forgotten his name. Isn't that terrible? Scarpetti.
Well, he was, what, 9 books ago?
Yeah, it was a long time ago. I don't remember. Ooh, now he's going to haunt me. It was Scarpetti. Anyway, she's at the mausoleum taking a group around, and she trips and she hits her head on Gus's mausoleum. Gets taken to the hospital, gets checked out, she's fine. Like I said, this is all happening off stage. You don't see any of this. The book actually opens the next day when she comes back to the cemetery. She's back with another group, she's back at this mausoleum, and Gus's ghost is waiting there for her. So this is the first she knows she can talk to ghosts, and she's not real happy about it.
I remember reading that book and how relieved she was by the end of the book where she had solved the mystery around Gus and thought, oh, all this relief. And then you put this little twist at the end of the book about this new ghost who's heard through the grapevine or the ghost line that she can solve problems for ghosts.
Yes, and I'm still very proud of that ending because, like you said, she wraps the whole thing up. Gus goes off to wherever it is ghosts go, and Pepper goes back to her office, and there's a woman sitting there in a poodle skirt who's obviously from the 1950s. And the last line of that book is, "Hiya, honey, Gus sent me." So I still like that ending.
Well, it certainly takes you into the next series and goes on. And the wonderful Cleveland scenes and all that. But here you are, Cassy Daniels, you have this wonderful series about Pepper Martin. And then a publisher comes to you and says, hello, we'd like you to write a series for us. Tell us a little bit about the totally different series that you wrote about Alexandria, Virginia, and two friends.
Virginia, of all places. Yeah, that was one of those funky things that happen in publishing. I was writing the Pepper Martin mysteries and perfectly happy doing just that, and got a call from my agent who had gotten a call from a publisher. They were looking for someone to write a cooking-based mystery series, and asked if I would be interested in doing that. So I did. They were called the Cooking Class Mysteries. And my name on the cover of those books was Miranda Bliss, and there were 5 books in that series. They were a lot of fun. Now, I did a lot of soul searching for that because, of course, they said a cooking mystery. And my first thought was, there are enough cooking mysteries in the world because there are tons of them. So I kind of looked at what was out there and thought, okay, in all those books, usually the main character is really a good cook or a good baker or whatever. So I made my main character, Annie, the world's worst cook. And she is taking cooking classes and then ends up working at a restaurant. So that was the whole basis of those. And like I said, there were 5 in that series. That series is now done.
When you write a series on request from a publisher, do you get to choose the name under which it'll be published, or did the publisher say you're going to be Miranda Bliss?
No, I got to choose the name.
And how did you come up with it?
It's just like choosing names for characters in a book. You just kind of start playing games. What sounds good, what fits the tone of the book you're writing. For the Cassy Daniels name, I once upon a time wrote a series of young adult horror books under the name of Zoe Daniels. And when I needed a name for the mysteries, it was kind of like, okay, Zoe has a sister, her name is Cassy, and that's how, it's just fun. It's fun to be a lot of people.
It sounds like it, and you are another new person recently. You are now Kylie Logan.
I am also Kylie Logan right now. Right now I am Cassy and Kylie, so only 2 personalities at the moment. Yes, Kylie Logan. I like antique buttons, and many people do. I'm finding that out now. And I've just always liked looking at them and going to stores that have buttons. But I was up in Ann Arbor, Michigan a couple years ago, having lunch at a cute little outdoor place, and 2 people came out and sat at the table right next to me. I was the only one out there, so they had their choice of tables. They sat at the table next to me and proceeded to break up. She was saying things to him like, well, you can't move to San Francisco. We're married. You have to tell me if you're moving to San Francisco. It was awful. And it went on and on and on. And I kept expecting them to apologize because I was this far from them. I'm obviously listening to everything they say. And I wanted them to apologize so I could say, no problem, I'm a writer and you're going to be in my next book. But they didn't do that. And I finally just thought, I got to get out of here. So I just packed up everything and I left. And there happened to be an antique store next door. So I walked in. Well, what I didn't know, it was an antique button store. And I just had the best time. I ended up talking to the owner for hours. And as I left that shop, I thought, antique button shop, great spot for a mystery. So that's where the Button Box Mysteries started. And the first one was out last September. It was called Buttonhold. The second one is called Hot Button, and it comes out in June, and I am currently working on Panic Button.
It's one of those things where you think, now how in the world can you write a mystery about buttons? But certainly you've done it. And again, what I like about your character, Josie Giancola, I think is her name in it, about Josie, is she's a woman who is an ordinary person, but for a change she's got money.
Yes.
And her money, yes, her money comes from an unusual source.
Well, Josie was a theater major in college, and she majored in theater because she was a costumer, which of course means she put a lot of time and effort into buttons. And it never really went far for her because she wanted things to be too exact. She was too worried about authentic buttons on costumes, you know, things like that. And soon after graduation, she did the costumes for a movie, low budget, low class, sci-fi fantasy musical called For Whom the Trolls Troll, and I can't say that very easily. Because a friend of hers was directing it, and she worked for nothing, and it was just fun. Well, it's turned into a cult classic, at least in the book, and is shown on college campuses now, and she's making a ton of money. So she gets to quit her day job and start her dream business, which is a button shop.
It certainly makes for another twist. Again, that twist that you give to your characters that makes them just that added dimension to your characters that I enjoy so much. And then you told me you just sold a new series?
Actually, two. There's one you don't know about.
Oh, well, I guess I'm going to hear about it at the same time everybody else does.
That's right. So here's the scoop. I have a new series starting next year that is going to be set at Put in Bay. It's called The League of Literary Ladies, and it's about a group of neighbors who live on South Bass Island who can't stand each other. They're always bickering. So-and-so's music is too loud. There's too much traffic at so-and-so's house. So-and-so burns bonfires and this little silly bickery things. And they are in front of the town magistrate again, fighting with each other. And he decides the only way for them to get along is if they get to know each other. And he sentences them to be a book discussion group. So each of the books in this series will be based on a classic novel. The first book is called Mayhem at the Orient Express. Guess which novel we're basing it on. And there's a new restaurant in town called the Orient Express, and the mystery will happen there. So that's going to be a lot of fun because I get to bring in some of the classics that I love. We've got coming up A Tale of Two Biddies, which is about the Lafarge sisters who own the knitting shop on the island. Wuthering Heights. It's been fun coming up with just really silly twists on classic books. So that's one of my new projects, and that will be the next thing I'm working on. And then I very recently sold another series. We're back to food for a little bit. It's about chili cook-offs and two half-sisters who hate each other, who are forced for a lot of complicated reasons to work their dad's stand at chili cook-offs that travel around the country. Dad is missing, they have to find Dad, and in the meantime they have to work together. So they will be solving some mysteries together too.
Now that's interesting because it has a travel theme to it. Does this mean that you're going to have to research this by going to chili competitions around the country?
I'm hoping. That would be a lot of fun. We'll see how that materializes. I set the first one in New Mexico because I've been to New Mexico a number of times, so that gives me a little cushion there that I can start out in a place I'm familiar with. And I'm, again, particularly fond of the first title of that series. It's called Chili Con Carnage. Silly. Silly, silly. I love it.
Though that is what makes it fun. And what you're writing are what's generally known as the traditional mysteries. So not too much blood, guts, and gore.
Right. A lot of people call them cozy mysteries. Think of Murder, She Wrote. And Snoopy old Jessica Fletcher. Every time I watch those, I think, wow, she's not good to have around. Bodies start dropping when this woman's around. But that's the genre. So you've generally got a small cast of characters. It's not anything sweeping. There's no European country hopping, you know, as in a lot of thrillers or in a lot of the bigger mysteries. You've got a set location, a small cast of characters, and you can see, you know, for instance, in the Button books, it's Josie, the people who work in the button shop, the people in the neighborhood. So that's what you're concentrating on in books like this. And they're very popular these days, so that's great.
Certainly makes it great for you and for other authors who are doing that type of writing. And it's wonderful for the reader, because when you come to the end, whether it's a Pepper Martin book or now a Josie Giancola book, or if it was your Annie and Eve books, the reader has a sense that they don't have to leave these characters.
Yes.
They're going to be able to visit with these characters again and follow what happens next.
And it's nice for the writer too, like you mentioned earlier, having personality twists with these characters. If I was writing a single standalone book, it might have 80,000 words in it. Well, the 9th Pepper Martin book will be out in September, and I'm terrible at math, but I think that means I've got something like 800,000 words so far that I've been able to play with these characters. So I've got a lot more room to let them grow and let things happen to them, because we keep revisiting them, and gives me another chance to play with their lives and mess things up for them. It's great fun.
How do you keep track of what's happened before?
Not well enough. I need to do that, and every time I write a first book in a series, I tell myself I'm going to, and I never do, because you do forget. I'm working on the 3rd Button book right now, and I put someone's apartment in a certain neighborhood. Those books take place in Chicago. I put the apartment in a certain neighborhood, and then I'm reading the copy edits on the 2nd book and realize that's not where his apartment was. So I need to start being far more diligent about things like that.
Now, you've set books now in Cleveland, in Alexandria, Virginia, now Chicago, and you're going to have your Chile mysteries travel around the country. You must need a map on your wall to keep track of all the places.
Yeah, the good thing is the way I have my writing schedule set up right now, I'm certainly only working on 1 book at a time. And I know people who don't. I know people who will do 2 books at a time, and that would make me start raving mad. So I know every February I have a Button book due. All I have to think about is Chicago. After that, I'll worry about South Bass Island. You know, so I've got things sorted out. That helps a lot.
You mentioned a little while ago your agent. How did you go about getting an agent to begin with, or were you able to sell your first book without an agent?
No, I sold my first book with an agent. I had tried on my own. And as I mentioned, that was 20 years ago. And these days, it's even more important to have an agent. There are very few publishers now that will accept manuscripts without an agent. There might still be a couple. I believe Harlequin may be one that takes what they call over-the-transom submissions. But most publishers will want work to come through an agent. And it's not easy finding one. I tell people in writing classes, or when they ask these kinds of questions at libraries and such, there's a book called The Writer's Guide to Literary Markets, and start there, see who's looking for what kinds of books they represent. Because some agents, for instance, will only do cookbooks, and others specialize in mysteries, and you don't want to waste your time sending your science fiction book to somebody who only does coffee table travel books. So there's a lot of homework that goes into publishing.
Sounds like there's a lot more to writing than sitting down with ideas and putting them on paper.
Oh yes, I would say at least 50% of the job is the marketing and the business, and maybe more these days, especially with things like Facebook and Twitter and blogs and websites, and there's a lot of background work that has to be done. It's a lot of work.
You have a website, don't you?
I do. It's www.cassydaniels.com, and readers can email me directly from the website. I also have a Facebook page, both as Kylie Logan and as Cassy Daniels, so folks can stop by and say hello.
Well, it's been wonderful having you stop by here today and say hello and share some of your experiences. As I said, I'm a great fan of yours, and this has been a real pleasure for me to talk with you today. And I hope for all of you that it's been a pleasure watching today and learning a little bit about a very popular local mystery author. Thank you so much for watching our view through our kaleidoscope today. We hope you'll remember our sponsor, RSVP. And in case you don't know, RSVP offers adults age 55 and older opportunities in the local community. For more information, just call RSVP. The number's on the screen. Thanks so much for watching today. This is Irma Baker saying, have a great day.
Since 1971, RSVP has been matching volunteers' talents to community needs. RSVP is affiliated with the Corporation for National and Community Service, a national organization that supports service and volunteering through grant-funded projects. Volunteers organize neighborhood watch programs, tutor children, renovate homes, plant community gardens, assist victims of natural disasters, and serve their communities in many other ways. RSVP offers maximum flexibility and choice to its volunteers as it matches the personal interests and skills of Americans 55 and older with opportunities to serve their communities. If you're interested in adding more meaning to your life and improving the lives of others, please call 330-253-4597, extension 166.
Distribution of this program has been made possible through the generous support of the Kaler Law Firm. At the Kaler Law Firm, attorney Jim Kaler helps seniors and veterans who need long-term care keep some of their life savings in the family. For more information, visit www.protectingseniors.com. The mission of the Kaler Law Firm is protecting a senior's life savings.